continued commitment to maintain and expand sanctions aimed at weakening the Russian war machine. We also, dear Kaja Kallas, welcome the planned initiatives concerning the EU's neighbourhood, including the rollout of the Pact for the Mediterranean and the forthcoming EU strategy for the Middle East. This European Parliament has repeatedly called for a more coherent EU approach to the region, aimed at promoting stability, addressing humanitarian needs, and supporting democratic governance. Finally, we note that these initiatives come at a time of increasing geopolitical volatility, with ongoing instability in several regions and increasing risks of spillovers. In this context, we also welcome the initiatives aimed at strengthening democratic resilience and addressing challenges such as disinformation, cyber attacks, and foreign interference. So, having said that, we now look forward to hearing more about how these priorities will be taken forward in the coming year. I now give you the floor for 15 minutes, and once again, a warm welcome to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament. The floor is yours.
Thank you, honourable members. Dear David, it's really good to be here. We are living in this very, very turbulent times, and there is clearly a connection between Russia's illegal war against Ukraine and what is going on in the Middle East. Both are products of erosion of the international law. Without accountability, judicial or political, the war will engulf the world once again. And the way the crisis in the Middle East is unfolding already bears characteristics of the worst-case scenario in many ways. First, geographic reach. In addition to the United States, Israel, Iran, also the Gulf countries, Jordan have been struck repeatedly by Iranian bombs and drones. Turkey, Azerbaijan have been tried. Lebanon and Iraq have been pulled in. Pakistan is also in a very difficult situation with the Mutual Defense Pact with Saudi Arabia, while it fights a war with Afghanistan. And our own member state, Cyprus, has been hit. Second, the wide-reaching economic impact. Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz is the choke point for global trade. As we all know from the news, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz dropped by roughly 70% in the first days of the war. And the impact of the energy prices on the energy prices is acute. And this was also discussed yesterday in the Energy Council and will be the center of discussions, of course, in the European Council this week. But the impact of the blocked Hormuz Strait is truly worldwide. The US and Europe import a minimal amount of energy through Hormuz. Around 80% of oil and LNG goes to Asia. Some regions will suffer more than others because of this war. And think about just, Asian countries that are dependent on the energy, but also fertilizers. For example, 54% of Sudan's fertilizers come via the Strait of Hormuz. And if it is a lack of fertilizers this year, there's going to be famine next year. Or the food that goes via Strait of Hormuz to the countries in the Middle East. It has an effect on semiconductor plants in Taiwan or on farms in Brazil for the fertilizer supplies. So it really, really has a global impact. Now, protecting the freedom of navigation is now at the top of global agenda and must be reinstated in the Strait of Hormuz. Everyone is looking for addressing this situation. And just yesterday, we had the meeting with the foreign ministers to discuss. We have an active mission, Operation Aspides, in the region of the Arabian Peninsula, and we discuss what kind of role this operation could play. Of course, in the immediate term, besides the energy sector, there are many aspects that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. There are 1.3 million European citizens living in the region. My first priority is their safety. Last week, the first fully funded EU-funded flights under rescEU departed from a conflict situation. Our delegations have coordinated over 70 national flights to get our citizens home. At least 30,000 have been now repatriated with member states' assistance, and we see that the demand is slowing down. This is good, but we must continue to support those who wish to leave the region. So the solidarity of European Union is really not leaving anyone behind. Then there is the spillover effect to Ukraine. The longer the war continues in the Middle East, the more Ukraine suffers. I mean, Russia is already making money off the war in the Middle East with higher oil prices, and the Strait of Hormuz closed. They can now again fund the war much longer, and with the aim of bringing the oil price down, the decision of the United States to relieve sanctions to the Russian oil could not have come at the worst time for Ukraine. Europe must mitigate Russia's increased energy profits by upping our own pressure through sanctions and breaking also Moscow's shadow fleet. Our inability to reach agreement on the 20th sanctions package or on the support loan for Ukraine is really putting the security of European Union at risk. These are issues that must be resolved during the meeting of European leaders this week. Otherwise, we will have our own goal here. Iran is waging the war on the world. Its game plan is clear: raise the price of escalation to build the pressure for de-escalation. But there are no signs of this war slowing down right now, or that there is an exit strategy. So this is true also, for the war in the Middle East as well as the war in Ukraine. As we are doing for Ukraine, we must do everything we can to manage the current situation by pushing for diplomatic conclusion. Europe's security depends on it, but so does the world. We must work with our partners in the region to figure out the way to make proposals to US, Israel, and Iran on ways to stop this war. Honourable members, while we handle the fallout of the biggest crisis the world has faced in recent history, Europeans must remain laser focused on our own security. Our ability to shape the emerging world order, to defend the rules-based international order, and prevent anarchy depends entirely on our strength. And this starts with our defense of Ukraine and how we manage the aftermath of the war. For example, setting up the special tribunal for Ukraine is an urgent priority. We know from our long experience in conflict mediation that justice is the key for lasting peace. But our security has many dimensions, from economic security to preparedness, from technological autonomy to defense-related issues, to the impact of security in different global regions. Take Arctic, for example, that has been really at the center of crisis some months ago. If the Arctic ice melts, then of course Russia and China have more interest in increasing their presence. And this year we will also come up with a new Arctic strategy. On broader European security, together with President von der Leyen, we are working on bringing all the elements together under a new comprehensive approach later this year. And this should respond to the rapidly changing strategic context that the EU now faces. The main question is simple: how do we safeguard our core values and interests and protect our citizens? Of course, this security strategy will be based on updated joint threat analysis, and this is now being compiled by our European Intelligence Center, INCEN, based on input from the National Intelligence Services, and it should be ready by the end of April. Yesterday, we also had the first informal discussion with the foreign ministers of European Union regarding this security strategy. Honourable members, a stronger Europe depends on bolstering partnerships with third countries. Today, Europe has much more to offer to its partners than ever before. Really, when I go around the globe, I see this wish for more Europe everywhere. Yesterday, we had the discussion with the Foreign Minister of India, with the Foreign Ministers of European Union. We have the new security and defense partnership with India, but of course there is much more that we can do apart from this. And what is the fundamental underlying principle is that Europe sticks by its friends. Take the Gulf, for example. We were in close contact immediately when the attacks happened. I convened a EU GCC ministerial meeting to discuss this situation and come up with a joint statement. Some of our member states also immediately answered the call to increase air defense support to Gulf states. And we are working also to bring, the knowledge of Ukraine regarding the drone interceptors and the needs of Gulf together to actually also boost the European and Ukrainian defense industry. Our commitment to our partners is why the European Union is also building up defense and security with others. I already mentioned India, but we have altogether now 9 security and defense partnerships with countries in Europe, Asia, and North America. And I will sign one with Iceland tomorrow, and there are many more interested knocking at our door. What also sets Europe apart from others are our values. And in the face of this brutish power politics, Europe has no need to distinguish between values and interest, because I really truly feel that our values are our interests. That is why defending our values must always characterize our work with partners. Take humanitarian aid, for example. When Lebanon came under attack last week, we quickly tapped into our emergency aid reserves to make aid available for 130,000 people. And the first deliveries arrived last week. Especially in this current climate, especially now, the EU must remain a strong advocate and champion of international humanitarian law and humanitarian aid. And that is also why we will be working this year on making collective humanitarian action faster and more effective in times of crisis. And finally, we invest in partnerships because they also strengthen Europe's endurance as a global force for good, which brings me to where I began. The damage that both the war in the Middle East and Russia's war in Europe are doing to the international order. The fact that both of these wars have taken the world closer to a third world war than we have been in the last 80 years. And the more we can rally others behind, working collectively together to address collective challenges, the greater chance we have to overcome forces seeking to bend the world at their will. This only confirms what we already know. I mean, working with our partners, the vast majority of the world seeks stability and predictability that rules-based order provides. And that is why the European Union works toward this with our partners. This will be the message I will bring to New York when I address the Security Council in April. It will also be the message you will hear this week when UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres joins us at the European Council. Honourable members, I think this is not the time to question ourselves. This is not a call for Europe to rethink our personality, our priorities, our ambition for a peaceful world governed by strong international norms and rules. If there is one message to take home today, it is this. Now is the time to stand strong for what we believe in, including international law, to defend our union, to build stability in our neighborhood, and establish the broadest network of international partners. And the world is really, really looking at Europe and counting on us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear High Representative and Vice President. I will now open the first round of questions and comments. As always, the coordinators get the floor first, and it's 2 minutes each, and we kick off with Michael Gahler.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's so obvious, given the war against Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, around the Gulf, that each and every individual member state is just irrelevant to address these issues. And also the European Union only will be relevant when you stand united. So if I understood you correctly, yesterday the foreign ministers, they all agreed, and please confirm it, that this is not, well, I put it in my words, this is not our war. We are not going to engage in this endeavor. For that. The other questions that arise, of course, are whether or not we can, in a different way than by providing ships, influence the ongoing events. And I wonder what your suggestions in this area are. Apart from that, when we look to a situation like currently in Lebanon, you indicated that we are there with humanitarian aid. The question is, are we in a position to influence events in a way that, for instance, the further advancement of troops into the country and the amount of refugees would not further be stepped up. When it comes to the latest developments also with regard to the US and the indications that President Trump referred to on NATO, that it would have an impact. Do you have any indication what that could actually mean if we don't engage there? And or can we be hopeful that we will not have a real effect? Thank you.
Thank you. We already have a long list of speakers for the second round, so please stick to your speaking time. Next is Nacho Sanchez-Amor for 2 minutes.
Sorry, I have to admit that I have a growing sympathy for your position, because you arrived with a war and now you are in the middle of a war on fire. Listen, sometimes I'm not in sympathy with some of your position, but my concern is, again, the double standards, the coherence of our approach in different conflict and crisis. When Mrs. von der Leyen said in this toxic speech, and this part has not been corrected, it's pointless to wonder if Iran war is a war of necessity or a war of choice. But we have been saying for years that the Russian war is a war of aggression. And now if we have to examine other conflict, we don't use this kind of approach, and even we avoid to mention the first aggressors, meaning United States and Israel. And when we talk about, we have to take the world as it is, and the mention of Mrs. von der Leyen, we have to focus on the reality of the situation. It does mean to condone the territorial gains of Russia in Ukraine, or we have to try to reverse this situation. And we talk about, when we talk about Russia has to pay the damage caused, is this valid for Israel and the situation in Gaza? Is it valid for when you talk about the war crimes is valid for Netanyahu and the ministers? What I like, my humble advice, Kaja, when you have to talk about Iran, change Iran for Ukraine and listen the sound of the phrase. If the phrase sounds fishy or squeaking, that means that we are using double standards. And my last point is try to address also the European citizens. When you talk, you are not only being listened by other interlocutors in the world, you are being listened by the European citizens, and they need European voices because they are coming back to the national leaders. They are listening Sanchez and Macron and Meloni and even Carney, but they are not listening to anyone from Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Patriots, Mr. Thionnet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Madam High Representative, I'll be putting my question in French. The most recent major international crises have pushed European countries to adopt sometimes common positions, but quite often diverse and divergent. Spain has clearly condemned the US attack on Iran. Other countries support it. Others don't support it, but are deploying resources in the region to defend their interests. On the question of Russian assets, it's not been possible to reach unanimity. And the new demonstration of support to Ukraine will be made by 24 rather than 27. We've heard the Belgian Prime Minister talk about the future normalization of relations between Europe and Russia, something which is totally unimaginable for other capitals. In the diplomatic crisis around Greenland, several states cooperated to send a clear political message to the US administration, while others sought discretion working within NATO rather than trying to demonstrate force. There's also the example of the coalition of the willing, trying to regulate or trying to settle the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Not all European states are involved, everybody participating according to their capacity and political will. So, in light of that, there seems to be no common will or interest in Europe, either in the Middle East or elsewhere. At the same time, we can see that the greatest level of effectiveness can be found in the formats of ad hoc coalitions between countries, and not in seeking a baseline position that everybody can agree on. How do you understand this reality? Do you support the development to a differentiated Europe where states can progress together as far as they wish to? And in light of this trend, is there a risk that we will see the Commission try to work beyond its remit and speak on behalf of the 27, given that there is a lack of unanimity amongst the states themselves? Thank you.
For the ECR, Adam Bilan.
Thank you, Chair. Madam High Representative, as Russia's full-scale invasion enters its fifth year, discussions on a peace plan and Ukraine's EU future have accelerated. While the Commission's 2025 report highlights progress, it also underlines the need for further reforms, notably in anti-corruption and judicial independence. At the same time, reports of a possible EU membership light model have emerged as part of a potential peace arrangement. My question is, while reaffirming strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty, reconstruction and European future, how does the Commission conceptualize any reported EU membership light arrangement, and what concrete forms of integration would such a model entail in practice? My second question is on Cuba. 10 years after the signing of the Political Dialogue and Cooperation Agreement with Cuba, and despite the commitments undertaken by Havana, as well as the European Union's political and financial openness, the Cuban regime has become more repressive towards its own citizens, more destabilizing in the Latin American region, and increasingly engaged in actions directly threatening the security of Europe and its citizens. The number of political prisoners continues to rise, and thousands of Cuban nationals are reportedly participating alongside Russian forces in the war against Ukraine. The European Parliament, through the adoption of Amendment 82 in its recent SFSP report, has made it clear that such regimes should not continue to benefit from privileged cooperation with the European Union, including under the PDCA. In light of the European Parliament's call to suspend the PDCA, how does the Commission justify maintaining the agreement, and what concrete conditions and benchmarks would need to be met for suspension to be enacted? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. For the Renew Group, Hilde Woutmans, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And dear Kaja, I always ask myself, how can you make a work program with the President as President Trump at the other side? So that's really a question I think we have to reflect. I think we as Europe need to react much more quicker than we do. But for that, we have to change, of course, the functioning of some institutions. You are very right on Iran and the Middle East and of the Strait of Hormuz and the economic impact. I think that's really what our citizens are asking us. What can Europe do? What will Europe do? So on that question, what can we do to help you to push forward that freedom of circulation will come back and that the economic impact will not be so big as it is for the moment? Secondly, on Ukraine, is there still, and now I'm very open, and the first time maybe I will ask a question as a Belgian MEP, is there still a unanimity or a big consensus in the Council and the Commission? Because the last days was a lot to do about the declarations of our Prime Minister De Wever, who said we have to normalize the situation with President Trump. And I say what a lot of European leaders think, but don't dare to say. So I really, with Putin, what did I say? With Putin, I'm very sorry.
First Putin, then Trump.
No. Prime Minister De Wever, of course, mentioned Putin. How can you react on that? Was that a topping yesterday? And is it true what he said? Because I cannot think that he was speaking for a lot of leaders. And then last but not least, the European security strategy. I think it's really necessary. And for me, we have to put forward more pressure on the European pillar in NATO. And my personal conviction on the European army. But that's maybe for a later stage. But how can we work on that? And last but not least, I want to support colleague Nacho. I think we have to communicate more with the European citizens. Much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the Greens, Hannah Neumann, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I will actually speak on the work program. First, the Middle East strategy. In the shadows of the current escalation in the Middle East, we see that the situation, especially regarding Palestine, is not improving. Since the ceasefire from October 2025, 663 civilians have been killed in Gaza. We see the expansion of settlements and also the killing of civilians, including children, just last weekend. But we also see that Hamas is actually not being disarmed. So I'm wondering, what is the EU strategy? How will it be reflected in the Middle East strategy? Also given that the approaches of Trump and his likes in his Board of Peace are clearly not moving ahead. Second question, the people in Iran are seeing the second digital blackout only this year, with 2.5 weeks now of no access to internet at all, while the regime can continue to spread its disinformation. They are working with Chinese technology, and we see that a lot of other dictators are very interested in what is going on there because they want to replicate the situation. At the same time, there are technical capabilities out there to work on circumvention. So I know it's not in the work program because it's a rather recent trend, but I'm wondering what is the European Union doing to prevent this kind of digital blackouts continuing. And then maybe a third question on the sanctions. We are putting a lot of sanctions on Russia, on Iran, on a lot of other countries. We are improving when it comes to sanctions enforcement regarding Russia in the implementation. We are not deploying the same tools when it comes to sanctions enforcement with Iran and others. So I'm wondering if there is any plan to step up. And lastly, allow me just one remark. As frustrated as I am with the current US and Israeli escalation in the Middle East, I would strongly refrain from comparing the situation of Iran with that of Ukraine, given that the Iranian regime is really responsible for a lot of regional escalation, for terror attacks in the European Union, but also has slaughtered and massacred its own population just in January this year. So I would very much appreciate if we could not compare the two.
Thank you very much, dear Hannah. The Left, Danilo Della Valle for 2 minutes.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair, Commissioner. On the Strait of Hormuz and the European states being involved there, I think we need to return to common sense. It's fairly straightforward. This isn't our war, and the only way to resolve this conflict must be through diplomacy. We can't short-circuit things looking at what Ms von der Leyen has said about the end of the old world order, and we need to be pragmatic, especially given the fact that the war of aggression by the US and Israel on Iran, where there have been no successes scored as aggressors, and yet it's a systematic violation of the rule of law by Israel and the US on this occasion. So I think we're talking about that short circuit and looking at how the European Union needs to step in, whether you're comparing it with the Russian-Ukraine war. I think maybe we can also see a comparison saying that we need to look for dialogue. We need to sit down around a table, but the EU is absent from that. We're showing complete weakness in this. And I think also energy provisions, the US are dragging us into a global conflict with no exit strategy. And we're seeing the Gulf states and Iran under fire. Tehran's not in an easy situation after two weeks of Trump's attacks. So I think we need to look at the interests at stake and look at the economic interests at stake and look at how gas needs to be got to the EU as well. On the future of the EU, whether we want to push towards sourcing things from the US or whether Trump's going to then turn the tap off. Looking at all the attacks of US and Israel with no condemnation and the bombing coming the other way as well, I think we need to think about preventing this from happening in the first place.
Thank you. For the ESN group, Mr. Stoyanov, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Kallas, I will speak in Bulgarian.
Madam Kallas, in November 24 here, in this committee, you opened up your hearing with the words freedom, choice, independence, etc., promising to strengthen the Union's positions on the world stage, making sure that we're always at the negotiation table in various forms of partnership. Today, however, the reality is rather different. The European Union is not present in key negotiations on Ukraine or the Middle East. In 24, you promised good relations with our biggest ally, the United States. Now you've just told us that the United States don't like us anymore and would like to sow divisions amongst us. So, your ideas become increasingly abstract, I'm afraid. It's all sweet talk, but problems abound and there are no solutions in sight. A lot of inconsistency. On the one hand, the Union speaks of clamping down on illegal immigration and border protection and so on. On the other hand, it would invite workers from third countries. And for many member states, that would represent unfair competition on the labor market. Buy European, another initiative, it is difficult to reconcile with Mercosur, for example. And last but not least, we should think more of our taxpayers rather than make them pay for all our whims, such as joint defense and so on. Our security will be preserved if we stick to our democratic principles and do not encroach on the sovereignty of member states. Thank you.
And finally, the chair of our subcommittee on human rights, Munia Saturi, please.
Oui, Madame.
Well, Ms. Kallas, I'd like to just address a few remarks to you from our annual report. The International Criminal Court, and in the last week you mentioned about the fact that the erosion of international rule of law is a problem. You said that we need to make sure that we support international law and human rights, and the European Union can and must do much more to protect international and multilateral relations, including protecting and imposing Russian and US sanctions on the International Criminal Court. What is your action being taken there? On the other points I'd like to raise, they're just a couple. First of all, the freedom of the media and disinformation. We all know authoritarian regimes exploit channels of information and undermine democracy by doing that. What measures are you taking to increase the possibility to have pluralism and freedom of information around the world? Secondly, on women's rights, gender equality, the restriction of women's rights around the world is not just problematic, it is an institutionalized abuse of rights, and we must take action in legal terms. So, Madam High Representative, what are you doing along these lines to make sure that those who commit these sort of abuses will be brought to book? So on those 3 points, I'd like to have as precise answers as possible. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the first round. First the coordinators and then the chair of our subcommittee. Colleagues, we have noted more than 25 colleagues who want to take the floor in the second round. But before I hand over to Kaja Kallas, perhaps I can just ask one very simple question as chairman of AFET. I was curious about the new security strategy that has been announced. I would like to know from you, how will this new security strategy relate to existing strategies like the economic security strategy, the Global Gateway Initiative, or the Strategic Compass? And more importantly for our colleagues, how will the European Parliament be consulted in accordance with the treaty rules? And will the EAS commit to structured consultations with AFET before the strategy is finalized? And now I hand over to you for the first round. Perhaps you can try to do it in 10 minutes so we have sufficient time, but it's up to you. But lots of colleagues want to ask also questions.
Yeah. Okay, I try in 10 minutes, but I'm not sure that I'm able to, because also a lot of questions. First, Mr. Galler, of course we are concerned by the freedom of navigation. But yesterday when we had the meeting, it was also very clear that this is not Europe's war. We didn't start the war, we were not consulted, and we don't know whether the objectives of this war really. So we, the member states do not have the wish to be dragged into this. Keeping this in mind, the freedom of navigation is still very, very important for us. Although, one might say that, the oil and gas going through the Strait of Hormuz, we are not so dependent on this route. But like I was mentioning, there are, Asian countries that are dependent. There are African countries that are dependent on the fertilizers. So really, still, we were discussing what could we do. We have the Operation Aspides working in the area. Right now, it's limited to the Muscat line, so it is operating in the Red Sea. And the discussion was that actually also the Red Sea needs to be open, because we haven't seen the Houthi attacks maybe yet. Maybe they come, maybe they don't. But definitely we need to have this alternative route open. And so the discussion is to also strengthen this operation that we already have in the area. Now, what more can we do? We are working with the partners of the Gulf, with Jordan, Egypt, but also our partners from other countries to actually, how can we come up with the proposals for US, Israel, and Iran to end this war? Because clearly we are all aligned that we want this war to stop, because it has too high costs for everybody in the world. So this is what we are working on. On Lebanon, in addition to the humanitarian aid, we are also supporting the Lebanese armed forces to disarm Hezbollah. And we are also discussing operation. As you know, UNIFIL mandate will be over, and then the question is whether there will be a void left. But but it doesn't mean that we will take over UNIFIL, but we are discussing whether there's appetite from the member states also to have our own operations so that we can help Lebanon in this regard. The question on the impact of NATO, of course, this is the statement of the President of the United States. We have learned, of course, over this year to take it much more calmly, but at the same time, the words of the President carry weight. So that is also clearly the case. So right now, we take a note of this statement. On your question, I'm not responsible for anybody else's speeches than my own. So, I mean, all the questions regarding the speech of somebody else should be addressed to that person. I'm working with 27 member states and the really, I mean, trying to put our position together. And we have managed in also to say that, international law is important. And to your question about the damages, the underlying principle in the civil law, in criminal law, also international law is that whoever causes the damages should pay for this. On the different positions, we have, foreign policy in European Union is very complicated because, as we have tried to have the European position, we still have 27 member states. And we don't always see eye to eye in all the issues. So bringing these member states together is always hard. I wouldn't put those two things like contradictory, the coalitions of the willing and the European Union. Because if you think, there are a lot of things that started from the coalition of the willing that eventually were European. If you think about Schengen area, for example, started as a coalition of the willing. If you think about Eurozone, started as a coalition of the willing. So clearly we can build on this. And what we have to keep in mind is that actually, our unity is our strength. I mean, I have had, many interactions with partners from Latin America, from Asia, especially now, especially in this geopolitical context. When something happens, everybody's calling, what are you doing as European Union? And I'm calling all my ministers. It's like, let's have a unified position, because if we have a unified position, we can also rally others behind us. And we are, and our adversaries also know this, because if you look in the world, in Europe, the big member states in Europe seem like big countries. In the world, they are small countries. We all are small countries. We are only credible, geopolitical power if we are acting together. And this is hard. I don't deny that it is. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we are not. But what I'm trying to argue with the member states as well, this time is different than anything else because we have these big wars going on. And there are a lot of countries, vast majority of countries in the world who are looking at us because we are not the superpower that actually wants the world that is based on whoever has the power can take what they want, but who actually supports the world that is based on some kind of rules. And vast majority of countries want that. So they are all looking at us. On the EU membership, light and the enlargement issues. So the discussions have not really we haven't had the discussions thoroughly on this. On Cuba, the issue of the agreement. I think what I asked my services already when Venezuela happened is like, let's look into both, our policy regarding Cuba, but also our policy regarding Venezuela. I mean, we have to have, we can see the different scenarios, and we also need to have a plan ready for these scenarios so that we can rally the 27 countries behind that. And when the scenario happens, we can actually, move forward together. So this is that is work in progress. And of course, this agreement that you're referring to has a lot of different opinions. I mean, I'm not defending it per se, but I'm saying that, this gives really the possibility to address the issues that you were also mentioning in your question. On the freedom of navigation, like I was mentioning, what can we do? I mean, for the time being, we are not extending the mandate of ASPIDES, but we are working together with our partners to really, bring this war to an end and de-escalate so that, it will be open, this Strait of Hormuz. The question on normalizing the relations with Russia, my question is always what has changed in this regard? And the first question is, what do we want to talk to the Russians about? And that's why I also presented to the member states, a paper. Let's discuss what we want to discuss with Russians if we have this possibility. Because it's also, if you look at the peace talks that have been now stalled, actually it is the other part is totally missing. Everybody's putting the pressure on Ukraine, but nobody's asking any questions from Russia. And if we continue like this, I'm sorry, we will have more of it. And that's why, let's discuss whoever then goes to discuss with the Russian. But it's also then has this mandate, or at least, we can all ask, did you talk about these issues? But it also sends a signal to Russia, is that, if they think that they can just, agree with the United States on issues that concern Europe and whatever US is telling us we will do, then let's give a very clear signal that this is not the case. You need to talk to us about the issues that concern us, and to be very, very strong here, not to say that, everything that is negotiated that doesn't concern us, that we somehow, praise these agreements beforehand, because then don't complain that we are not around the table, because we have given our approval upfront away. Now on Palestine. Yes, the new war in Middle East has really shifted the attention away, and the situation extremely dire. We discussed this yesterday with the foreign ministers, and I again made this push for the sanctions on violent settlers, because really it's a credibility of European Union as well. Because there, this is illustrating the problems that we have with the common foreign policy that everybody needs to agree to. That 26 agree, one doesn't, and we can't push this through. The phase 2 is completely stalled. Last FAC we had the discussion, not this one, but the one in February. We had the discussion with Nikolai Mladenov, also how the work is going and what could we do, but actually nothing is really moving. And our concern is that still, the Board of Peace, that it was how it was stated in the United Nations Security Council resolution, was to have a clear role for the Palestinians, to also have a clear timeline and how we phase out the interim solutions. On the Middle East strategy, I think when the war is going on, there are so many moving parts that there is no point in doing this strategy while everything is moving. So I think we have to take time on this. On the digital blackout on Iran, I know that we have been working on issues how to provide the internet also to Iran. I am just because I don't have it in my materials, I will come back, but I remember that we had this discussion. What more can we do? I mean, of course, we are supporting the civil society, but it's true that also the access to information is an issue. And what you also point out, I mean, the Chinese technology is really in the hands of autocrats working like this. So what are the alternatives? It's the question. On the sanctions implementation improvement, yes, we definitely need to do more work on Russia. We have the Shadow Fleet coordinator, and we are really working on, as soon as we see a ship, we don't wait for another package of sanctions. We do it immediately so that, you know, it has an effect. We do the reach out to the flag states also, and this work is really ongoing, and we have the sanctions envoy as well to talk to the countries who are actually helping with the circumvention of sanctions. But what I have to stress here is that it is European companies that are very often circumventing the sanctions, so that is a bit of a problem. Then Strait of Hormuz, keeping this open for us, you know, the question, sorry, I always get in trouble in Parliament, I'm sorry, but I didn't say anything. Okay. Diplomacy is the only way out. I think this is important to stress, and that's why you know, maybe we are not that vocal about engaging with different partners, but we definitely are. And then, yes, strengthen the Europe as geopolitical power. I still stick to my words. Yes, I've been in the office for 1 year. And I haven't managed to do everything, but still, I think, you know, it takes some understanding from the member states to actually get there, that when we are united, when we act together, when we put also our money where our mouth is, then we are, you know, geopolitical power. And we are working on the economic side, the competitiveness. We are also working with the military side. Sorry, and the questions on International Criminal Court. And what are we doing in this regard? I mean, we have supported ICC through the direct funding. We are also, you know, contributing financially to strengthen the capabilities of the Office of the Prosecutor. On the sanctions, I work with the member states whether there is like common position that we are, you know, taking steps that we have in our hands to take, but the member states were then at least not on board entirely. And on the pluralism and media freedom, we are supporting civil society. And on the security strategy, I mean, definitely we will have the consultations. Right now it is very in an initial phase because the member states really need to have the buy-in, because if the member states don't believe in this, then there's nothing going to happen. And my question is also, we have a lot of papers. I'm not really a big fan of papers. I'm more a fan of implementation of those papers. So how can we make, you know, the comprehensive approach so that it's also implemented by the member states? Thank you.
That was the most important sentence. For the records, the High Representative Vice President has announced that the European Parliament will be consulted and involved. Dear colleagues, this is a long list of colleagues who will take the floor. We will do the following in a very transparent manner. This is, by the way, a de Hond list, and Marty has noted the names. We will go through the list until 4:20, because the High Representative has to leave at 5:30, and she needs at least 10 minutes. So let's see how far we get. The first is And it's 1 minute, and in our committee, 1 minute is 60 seconds. 1 minute, Ms. Zovko is first.
Thank you. Madam Kaja Kallas, I read your interview in Financial Times this weekend, and I was struck by your message. You just said, and you repeated my confusion, you are not responsible on the messages from the President of the Commission. I mean, as a former ambassador, I know that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is responsible to his government. What is Commission doing? I mean, who is speaking? Do you have a one voice? Who is dividing this Commission? You? Your politics? Who is sending message to United States of America in our negotiations on the trade, on security guarantees for Ukraine? Can you just give me a clear answer? Who is running the show in Brussels? And please, who is your interlocutor in Washington on these crucial issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias Nemetz is next.
Thank you, Chair. Madam High Representative, we have always been critical on the Iranian regime and its violent repression on the Iranian people. But you have asked in the very beginning, how can we safeguard our core principles and values? I have a very simple answer. By condemning the actions by everyone, including the US and Israel, who threaten threatens principles and values on a daily basis. But let me ask you directly a simple question. Was the initial Israel and US attack on Iran against international law? And if yes, when will see you condemn the attack, and when will you stand up for international law and order? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Stier.
Thank you, Chair. High Representative, our influence in many areas of the world could be limited, but if there is one area where we have influence, actually responsibility for peace and security, is in the Western Balkans. There, we just debated the situation in Serbia, concluded that they are not making progress towards the EU, not aligning with our CFSP, and they are procuring not only defense but also offensive weapons like the hypersonic missile from China. So my question is, do you have the support in the Council to send a clear message to Belgrade that it's time to stop military cooperation with Russia and China, the security dependence from them, and to side fully with the EU?
Thank you. Next is Ms. Ferenc, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak in Hungarian. Az ukrajnai háború 5. évében járunk.
Thank you very much. The war in Ukraine has been going on for 4 years now. We're moving into the 5th year of war. People are being killed. And people are being unlawfully enrolled into the army. Now, last year, I already alerted you to the fact that József Zebedszén, who is a member of the Hungarian minority, was also conscripted into the army. He was mistreated and he subsequently died, but you ignored that. And in January, there was another case. Zsolt Begat had a medical certificate attesting to the fact that he was not apt to serve on the front, and he was nevertheless conscripted into the army, and he also subsequently died. We are talking about basic human rights here that must be observed in the Ukraine as elsewhere. These units must observe human rights, and in doing so we can save lives. Are you prepared to do something against these abuses in Ukraine?
Thank you, President. I will speak in Greek. Κυρία Κάλλας, έχετε παραλείψει αναφορά σε...
High Representative Kallas. Now, I think that you overlooked one important fact, and that is the way in which Cyprus is having to contend with the fallout from the war in Iran and the agreements that we have. Of course, we need to support Cyprus militarily, economically, and also strategically, and we will have to use the UN armed forces as well, and also pursue UN resolutions on the occupation of the Turkish part of the island of Cyprus, which is an illegal occupation, and that is why we call for the immediate withdrawal of forces and what possible sanctions will be imposed on Turkey if it fails to abide by such calls. And then the issue of escalation and the community acquis, because it is simply intolerable that you are not dealing with these issues when we're talking about occupation of EU territory, and we've got a situation which requires your support.
Asking for Mr. Ostrevičius.
Thank you, Chair. Well, supporting the Fidesz party representative here in the committee, I would really repeat a word: stop Putin. I mean, that's the best way. I mean, to stop killing Hungarians in Ukraine, Ukrainians in Ukraine, and all over. I mean, do it now. Madam Kallas, 2 points. You had just an exchange with the foreign ministers of the European Union. Is there any magic stick which coming out from your debates concerning possible alternative support for Ukraine, I mean budgetary support? It's 90 billion euros as it stands. And secondly, you rightly said, shadow fleet is a shame, 40%, around 40% of 500 and so shadow fleet ships are registered and operated in Europe by European countries, including the European Union countries. Is there any hope you will get a certain grip on those countries and ships?
Thank you, Petras. Next is Tonino Pizzula. 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Madam High Representative, I like your expression, more Europe everywhere. But I would like to add, first of all, more Europe in the immediate neighborhood of the European Union. We have heard recently several intriguing proposals on how to reassess and further develop the current framework. I have 2 questions. First, enlargement policy often brings unexpected developments. We are now hearing about potential return of Iceland to the negotiation table. Could such a development be stimulative for the overall enlargement process? Should we be considering a potential mini Big Bang, or will accession continue to proceed on an individual basis? Second, we have heard from highly ranked actors references to possible timelines for enlargement. In your view, should these timelines be understood as indicative political signals or realistic and achievable frameworks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Tonino. Next is our colleague Kohut.
Dear Madam Vice President, to survive, Europe must become stronger and more integrated. Although Iceland and Norway are not EU members, they remain our close economic partners and good friends. We are all Europeans. We share the same values and face the same threat from the East. In times of geopolitical crisis, Europe stands united. This is why I deeply appreciate the fact that Iceland will soon hold as a referendum on reopening negotiations with the EU. In time of crisis, we need each other, particularly with regard to security. I would like to ask about this aspect. 1 week ago, you said that the defense and security partnership with Iceland would be signed in the next coming days. When exactly will the agreement be finalized by the EU? And what steps are you taking to improve the process? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Willy Søndal is next.
Thank you very much. I think we all understand the situation of gravity we are in right now. We are not the ones causing the problems. That's the ones who deny to follow international rule. Of course, that's putting damage in Ukraine going on, but it's also the fully chaos Trump and Netanyahu are creating in the Middle East. I do not want with one sentence to defend the Iranian regime, but when you want to do like they did, to attack a country, you need to have a plan, you need to have some allies, you have to have some international body behind you when you do that. So I think what we learn from this is that we need to make much more energy on international alliances with the ones who agree with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Willy. Next is our colleague Bugalho.
Madam Vice President, first, condolences to all the French colleagues in the room who lost a national citizen 4 days ago to Iran. And the 2 questions. The latest Europol report mentions Gaza as a source of radicalization and security risk to our continent. To your knowledge, how higher is Europe's vulnerability to terrorism in the last 2 weeks since Iran was attacked? And the second question, in your first 10 minutes, you didn't say 3 words. Win the war. You said Europe's security depends on a diplomatic solution, end quote. I have to ask you, is the Commission moving on the peace for strength doctrine, or are you just less hawkish today than you were 1 year ago? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Barena Azar. Please, sir.
Gracias, Presidente. Señora Kallas, existe...
Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Kallas, there seem to be moves afoot to put an end to international law and to see the survival of the fittest. Might is right. I've seen that in the case of Russia, and I think that we have to take the same attitude when it comes to the Palestinian genocide, as well as the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela, as well as the moves now against Iran. Of course, we're not fond of the Ayatollah's regime, but that does not mean that you can have a superpower using power to bomb cities and triggering an escalating economic crisis. Again, that's backdrop. I would like to ask you whether you agree with assertions by President von der Leyen that the rules-based international order no longer exists and the European Union can no longer rely on a rules-based system. I wonder whether she said that and whether you agree with that, and I do not know whether it's really logical to have 2 such opposing opinions within the same College of Commissioners. And secondly, do you not think that at some point in time the European Union has got to try and bring about de-escalation? Thank you.
Mr. Tertsch, 1 minute.
Ms. Kallas, now we have heard here, and you basically suggested there was some kind of parallel between President Putin and President Trump. Do you think that we can also draw parallels between Ukraine and Iran? I mean, we've heard that from the left, for example. We've heard them say that here. Now, of course, President Trump is the head of the world's best democracy. You've got a democracy with the kind of division of power that we can only aspire to. And we've seen President von der Leyen ridiculing Parliament and saying that she can do what she likes regardless of what the European Parliament or the Court of Justice say. And we don't have elections. We've got Putin is a criminal and President Trump is ahead of a democracy. There can't be a parallel. Now, when it comes to Cuba, we see that the same financiers and the same people protecting a murderous dictatorship before it eventually falls.
Is next.
Thank you, Chair. The Commission's priorities in its work programme are clear: strengthening Europe's security, defending democracy, human rights, and ensuring resilience against external threats. When it comes to Iran, the gap between these words and actions becomes painfully clear. Dear High Representative Kaja Kallas, what has Europe been doing all this time while Iranians have been slaughtered by the IRGC? Hesitating, discussing sanctions, and seeking to resume diplomatic processes. Ms. Kallas, you have been sending a message that is the exact opposite of what you claim to defend. It is time for a change. It is time to re-examine the EU's approach to Iran and for once place the EU on the right side of history. No negotiations with terrorists. Dear High Representative, I call on you to act and support any means that will help bring down the regime. Thank you.
Thank you. We're entering the last 5 minutes. Mr. Brandstätter is next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice President. You said our unity is our strength, and of course that is right. And it brings me to the question about China. As we know, China wants to talk to 27 different countries, not to one European Commission. My question is, who are the countries who are the most difficult to convince that they not play their games? What can you do that we act as unity towards China? And my second question towards the United States. As EUDS, Democracy Shield, we've been to the United States, had very good conversations in the FBI, also in the Department of Justice, and they told us we also need you. We need the cooperation between Europe and the United States. So what can you do to, and also the whole Commission, to explain it to the American president more often that he needs us as well, so it goes both ways and then we can be friends again. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mavridis, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Kallas, the incident in Cyprus made it very clear that the Mutual Defence Clause 42.7 is not operational. How would you make it operational in the future? Second, as a chair of the Political Committee for the Mediterranean, I have been advocating for years now that within the EU defence, we could have regional defence sectors. I think that's also an idea supported by the Commissioner. I'd like to get your response to that, specifically whether would you support the permanent presence of European naval and area forces in Cyprus? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is for the Greens, Mr. Asens Yodra.
Gracias, Presidente. Señora Kallas, usted...
Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Kallas, you said that Europe has to defend and support its allies. Do you not, however, think that we ought, in that case, to be changing friends, finding some different friends, because usually your friends don't wage illegal wars and they don't trample roughshod over international law? And I think, got a number of presidents who ought to be behind bars. Some because they have been indicted by the ICC, and others because they've got 30 separate charges pending against them. And of course, this war is affecting stock markets across Europe. But the main problem is that it is a breach of international law, whereas we're not condemning what the US and Israel are doing. Iran reacted in pursuant to the UN Charter. So, with which authority should we be pushing back against Russia's aggression towards Ukraine, that being the case? Merci, Madame. Thank you very much indeed, Madam High Representative. Thank you very much indeed for having reminded of the importance of international law and recalling that Iran is not our war, whereas Ukraine is our priority. However, I would like to talk to you about something else, a crisis that seems to have got lost in the midst of everything else that is going on, and that is a civil war, forces seeking to win back parts of Syria. It's extremely serious. You've got members of ISIS who escaped, and you were seeing a bombing of parts of Kurdish Syria and Iraq, and we, the European Union, in that region are facing a huge security crisis. We're seeing the risk of a resurgence of ISIS, and I would like you, therefore, to commit to dialogue, therefore, with the Syrian authorities. It's absolutely essential, and make sure there is conditionality to the EU's aid, making sure the country does combat ISIS.
1 minute.
Thank you. I will speak in Greek. Κυρία Κάλλας, απέναντι στην εγκληματική επίθεση των Ηνωμένων...
High Representative Kallas, we are seeing this illegitimate aggression by the United States against Iran, and we are continuing to fail to face allies with their responsibilities to beef up their military presence in Hormuz. We have the problem of the Israeli attacks on Lebanon, and you're talking about expanding ASPIDES. So we are talking, therefore, about a widening of the conflict. Therefore, I believe that it is also incumbent on the Greek government here, given that there are international forces seeking to defend British bases on Cyprus, whereas we know that we also have problems given that there are US bases in Crete as elsewhere. Thank you very much.
I have to close the list, but we're going through all speakers anyhow. It's Mr. Brown.
Dear Madam,
You have just given a wonderful presentation of how unnecessary and useless your office is. With all due respect, the situation is clear as we look at the recent war. The gun, where is the gun? The weapon? It's the US Navy and Air Force. Who's the gun holder? Who's the perpetrator, the aggressor? It's the Jews, Israel and Jewish diaspora all over. And you, madam, you are merely the silencer at the end of the gun barrel. And this is everything you do here to hush, to stop me right now and all the world, all Europe, for the truth not to be spoken.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I just want to say, because you're always seeking for attention, I know you by now, but on behalf of this committee, I completely reject your anti-Semitic remarks you just did. You will not repeat this in this committee.
Could you please elaborate?
To the High Representative.
Could you please elaborate?
Mr. Brown, you don't have the floor. Shut up. Madam Kallas, please.
Thank you.
When I say Maul halten, will that be all right?
If you behave in this way, you will be treated like this, exactly. And put this on your video and tell your voters once again that you are the big victim. You are an attention seeker, you know that, and I've had enough of you. I've given you the floor 5 times today. Now would you please listen to the High Representative like all other colleagues?
Thank you. So try to fit into this 10 minutes. First, on your question, who is running the show? I mean, in June 2024, we got mandate, 3 of us. Antonio Costa for running the European Council, Ursula von der Leyen for running the European Commission, and me for High Representative, Vice President of the Commission to run the external action. Who is my interlocutor in US? Marco Rubio. Then on your question, international law gives you 2 possibilities to use force. One is for self-defense, and the other one is under the remit of UN Security Council resolution. So whoever uses force also has to justify this. On Belgrade, the cooperation, of course, the problem it is that when we see Serbia is not really in full alignment with our policies, we are working with them on different aspects. And when I'm already addressing the Western Balkan issue, then I want to note that we had over the weekend actually one little step in the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue in terms of also the issues that were there with the Serbian minorities. So I think we can work from there. Then on Ukraine war, yes, there are people recruited to the Russian army now, even from Africa, and we have to be very clear that whatever money is offered to these people, they are going to get killed in this war whenever Russia offers this, also for the people in the outsets of Russia. Cyprus issue. We have always, I have always raised the Cyprus issue with my counterparts whenever I'm talking. We are trying to find also solutions regarding this. Then the alternative plan for support loan and the sanctions package, we are working on the leaders level now to actually have the way out. So plan A for the time being, but of course then we need to see whether it is doable. On Shadow Fleet, we are constantly being creative on coming up with new proposals. On the enlargement, I want to stress that enlargement is always a geopolitical choice. I mean, having been in this process, it is also clear that, of course, you have to do all the benchmarks and all the work, but at the same time, for us, it's also a geopolitical choice. And I think in this geopolitical context, it's really, we should really move on with the enlargement. And when it comes to timelines, then at least when we joined, then it was also a timeline that we could also participate in the European elections that were in 2004, happening in 2004, if I remember correctly. So the point being that timelines are always good for pressure. On Iceland, we're going to sign this agreement tomorrow, actually, when it comes to security and defense. Of course, we are looking forward to the outcome of their referendum that is taking place 29th of August. But this shows actually that, countries want to join us, and that is a good thing. But we also need to show, to the Western Balkans that we are actually moving. Actually, today I had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Montenegro and also the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina, also push them on the European path. Radicalization. Of course, radicalization is a big issue, and why I'm always stressing accountability is because, if you have these attacks, whether it's, by the violent settlers, whether it's about by the Palestinians, if you don't have accountability for the crimes committed, there will be revenge and retaliation. So it's an endless circle. And that's why, if we want to diminish radicalization, we really need to see accountability for the crimes committed. And this is very, very important also on the international level. Peace by strength, this is absolutely the way. And that's why we are also working with our defense capabilities to be a military power, which we are not right now, but we are really working on that. What Europe has been doing in Iran to support the people, we have supported the civil society. Of course, we can't be vocal about this, and otherwise these people would be under attack. Also, different NGOs. But the point is that regimes rarely change from outside. They always change from inside, and that's why our approach has always been, really to enforce the people. So that they can take the future into their own hands. Then China. Yes, we need to have unity regarding China. And now the problem is when we have the discussions, we all agree on the diagnosis of the problem, issues that we have. Their economic coercive practices against our companies, also their support to Russia in this war. But we don't agree on the cure because the cure is painful. Let's be very honest, because China is very strong. They can also retaliate. And now, we have a choice. Either we take, more morphine, which means, subsidizing our companies, and eventually even the big countries run out of taxpayers' money to do that, or we actually try to tackle the issue as we are. So we are not taking seriously enough if we are not willing to act actually on our words, although we are raising these issues. So we need to work with that. And on the on 42.7, yesterday we were discussing this also briefly in the Foreign Affairs Committee. With 42.7, of course, member state has to initiate this. Cyprus hasn't initiated. But my issue that I've been preparing already before these attacks on Cyprus was to operationalize 42.7. So I've been sitting down with the military staff to come up with, concrete proposals. How would it work in practice? this. And in my vision, it is basically, two or three different scenarios. One is that when Article 42.7 is initiated, and there's no Article 5 because, the member state is not member of NATO, or it is not the threshold of Article 5. Then the second is when, Article 5, or it is below the Article 5, although the NATO country is attacked and 42.7 is initiated. And the third option is when Article 5 of NATO and Article 42.7 are initiated at the same time. And there, my wish, what I have tasked my service is to come up with this, because we need to have these discussions, and not only discussions, but also, tabletop exercises with the 27. I mean, how do we act if such a case happens? I mean, who does what? Because we don't really have that thought through, in my sense, the way it should be thought through. So I think this is really the momentum for these discussions, and the work is ongoing there. And then on Syria. Yes, absolutely. The resurgence of ISIS and what is happening in northeastern Syria and the camps especially is a great concern to us. I've been in contact also with Iraq. That was before this war started on Syria, regarding the camps. And what more can we do? And also with Syria, that they really need to have the control over this. So clearly we are keeping an eye on this and trying to help as we can, but this is clearly a problem that we should not underestimate. And then expanding Aspides, I was saying that we are not expanding Aspides for the time being, so there was no appetite for that. What we are discussing is strengthening the current operation Aspides that we have in the Red Sea. That means more capabilities, so that we can also keep the Red Sea navigation open.
Dear High Representative Vice President, thank you so much. Colleagues, I think many questions were covered. Thank you so much for attending today's meeting. We managed to give all colleagues who wish to take the floor actually the floor. And with this, I would like to thank you for your engagement and for the fruitful debate on the Commission work programme. We continue with the next item in 1 minute. Thank you very much, dear Kaja.